This thing here.
Yes. Yeah.
I made that 30 years ago. It's called The Meaning of Music, and it was the consequence of about a year's meditation on what it was that music was doing to us and why we were so attracted. It's such a remarkable phenomenon.
It's a weird thing, yeah.
It's a very weird thing, and I'll just run my initial hypothesis by you. And so music is often regarded as a non-representational art form. I had a great journalist up to my house this week, Rex Murphy, and he said to me, this was a quote, and I don't remember where he derived it from, that all art aspires to the condition of music, which is a lovely phrase. And so when I started to think about music, I was thinking about it because it was an engaging experience that was immune from rational criticism. And that really, so it had this intrinsic meaning that could not be subverted by criticism. And so it struck me as something extraordinarily powerful. And I started to understand at that time that the world, in a really deep sense, is made out of nested patterns. And those patterns we perceive as objects and actions, but what they are patterns in space and time. And that music is actually the most representative form of art because it represents the harmonious interplay of patterns. And then we pattern ourselves to the music and find that, what would you say, existentially engaging in a very profound sense. So anyways, that's my music theory.
Oh, without a doubt. And the easy version of that is a good beat, because a good beat implies in a primal sense a certain predictability and therefore a certain truth. I think you can see in a lot of people a sense that a good beat and the way you move your body to it equals a kind of truth because of the consistency.
And look how it unites us.
Yeah, and it brings people together.
Yes,
classical
really
music is harder because it's longer lined. And so a lot of teaching people to appreciate classical music is to teach them how to hear it as something other than just this endless desultory string of whatever. There's pattern in it too, and you don't really appreciate it unless you just learn how to breathe and take in the longer pattern. Yeah.
So when you listen to a great classical piece, say a Bach concerto or something like that, how do you have to listen to it multiple times before you understand it?
Definitely.
Yes.
Okay.
Seven.
So my rule is you don't really know it until you've heard it about 7 times, if it's challenging music. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't know if that was I'm sure there are some musical super geniuses who don't need that length of exposure to get it, but
I don't get it. Well, maybe 2 or 3 with some people, but to me, I want to drink it in. I'd sit with headphones and a CD, and that's becoming very old fashioned, but that's the only way that I can really do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing too, so how you expose yourself to continually to that pattern. And then you need a certain degree of familiarity with it. So it still retains some novelty, and then you really fall in love with it. And then if you listen to it a tremendous number of times, in some sense, you tend to exhaust it. Although the greater the piece of music, in my experience, and maybe this is a marker for depth and quality in music, the greater the piece of music, the longer it takes to exhaust it.
Yeah, and if it's a really great piece of music, it's never exhausted in my experience. But yes, that's true. If it's an okay piece of music on the level of, say, a hot dog, you'll need 20, 21, and then you've kind of gotten past that. And you look 20 years later and you realize, wow, that fell out of the rotation, and you sort of realize why, as opposed to the things that never fall out of the rotation because it sounds so corny, but you're always finding something different, or whatever you initially found, the feeling is such a kick, it's such a mind blow that you want it over and over. It becomes church. There's almost a religious aspect.
Well, there is definitely that, and we could talk about that more too. One of the things I also find absolutely staggering about music is how it can have that long-lasting and gripping form in such an endless variety of genres, and how that greatness and depth can manifest itself in each of those genres, regardless of what the genre is. And it's something that's very difficult to understand. Something as simple often as country and Western music, something like Hank Williams, which is very straightforward in some ways, still, to me, has that quality of inexhaustibility. And it's so...
Yeah, what amazes me, and if I were more profound about these things or more interested in bringing different parts of myself together, I would study it. It's harmony, because melody is one thing. Melody is a lullaby. Any human being is given that. Rhythm, especially consistent rhythm, I'm sure that we are genetically programmed by accident to appreciate that. Harmony is a funny thing. And I think that people who, for one reason or another, either training or temperament or both, feel harmony and get harmony, think that all human beings hear harmony the way they do. No, it's a very odd kind of ear. And I find myself wondering, what is it about major and minor and then everything else? And the fact that if you're a music listener, you associate those things with certain feelings. You often find that other people don't have the same feelings about the ones that you do. But yeah, it's a weird thing, this thing called music. You associate a certain combination of notes with nostalgia. For me, the flatted sixth means it reminds me of the past. Why? Very interesting things. Why would it remind you of anything when it's something that didn't exist when Homo sapiens emerged? Fascinating stuff.
I had a master's student when I taught at Harvard who did her thesis on the meaning of music from a biological perspective. And one of the things she came across, and I don't remember whose thoughts these were, was that deep bass notes remind us of large animals and high notes remind us of small animals. This is obviously a partial explanation,
right?
Obviously, and that more major tones are more maternal and comforting, and minor tones are more discordant and reminiscent of emotional upset. Something. So
that feels right, exactly.
It's so there, and it that ties in part into the emotional aspect of language itself, and all those things that we pick up, but then the question is, we quote unquote Europeans, I know it's weird for me to say that, but I think people understand. We hear major and minor and low and high that way. I wonder if an indigenous person who had never heard music like that before, let's go to Irian Jaya, it's not called that anymore, but the Western half of New Guinea, somebody from there, I wonder if they would hear it that way. And I can make a guess. The low notes being associated with the elephant and the high notes being associated with the hummingbird, that's probably universal because that's true about language. O, ah is big. E is small. That's true. However, the other parts, I wonder if all of that is just arbitrary European stuff that we pick up, from starting from listening to Mother Goose songs and then it going on. I'm sure this has been studied and I have not nosed into what those people were looking at. Yes, probably someone knows this and we're just ignorant about it.